Welcome to the In Love with PMDD podcast. I am your host, Dr. Rose, your PMDD relationship psychotraumatologist, and I help you stop the monthly PMDD breakups. PMDD is premenstrual dysphoric disorder. It is in approximately 1 in 5 women, and it makes you want to break up with your partner approximately 1 to 2 weeks before your period every single month. So as someone who has suffered with PMDD for over 18 years, I dedicated my doctorate practice to helping partners navigate those monthly PMDD breakups with everything from attachment styles, triggers, sensitivity to noise, sensitivity to touch, all of the things that you really struggle with when you're in PMDD. And I also dedicated my dissertation to a phenomenological study of the relationship experiences of partners of individuals who suffer with premenstrual dysphoric disorder. So I'm not just here to help the sufferer, the one who is suffering with PMDD. I am here for the partners as well. So if you need those private sessions, make sure you go to inlovewithpmdd.com and get those tools. So let's get into this week's PMDD trauma transformational tools that is going to help you stop the monthly breakups and stop the suffering and stress in your PMDD relationship. Let's get into it. Today, we are going to be talking about how to stop PMDD arguments before they start. This is such an impactful episode because it's going to be talking about not getting you to that place where you've said things below the belt, you've done things that you regret, and you've gotten to the point where you're like, why am I in this relationship? Should I even be here? I'm questioning everything about the relationship all of a sudden because we've had these big blowups. And I know that this is very common with PMDD partners where once you're in PMDD, you've had these big blowups and you feel like this is just how our relationship is going to be month after month. What's the point of even working on it? Because we're always going to get back to this point of arguing about sometimes the same things over and over and over. And it looks really different as far as the outcome. You're just saying like, I'm hoping that we don't get to this point where we're feeling like we want to break up, but then you get to those moments where that's the first thing that comes to your mind. And this topic basically came up because if you listen to the past couple of episodes, I was talking about the visit that my partner had. And this month of PMDD for me has been horrible. And I know for me personally, whenever I have arguments with my partner, it means my PMDD symptoms are going to be magnified. They're going to be so much worse than they would be before. And on top of that, I'm not going to have the in-depth support of my partner because we're not seeing eye to eye, meaning we're not connecting in the same way. And it was just really, really hard for me. And I traveled during this time, not by choice. I had to travel for work. So I had that going on. And I just had a lot of pressure and stress I'm writing my dissertation. The chapters were due. And so all of this mixed together just made my PMDD month horrible. And it all stemmed from arguments with my PMDD partner. And I remember just after I was going like a couple of days of, after the arguments and going over the details, I just really thought to myself, man, I wish we would have never argued in the first place. Like if I could have prevented this from happening, because you know how you get to that point where you're so like introspective, where you're like, what could I have done to avoid this? Because basically it's not worth it. Like all that I had to deal with after the fact was not worth having the argument. And for us, it was a situation where 2 weeks ago, because we're long distance. So 2 weeks ago, I went to San Diego and we had an amazing visit. I was in my follicular phase. And I feel sometimes that it's like when I'm in my good days and we have such an amazing time that when PMDD hits and we see each other right after that, like without there being a time in between, that it makes it so much harder for us. So in my mind, because we were having such an amazing weekend, I was like, oh, then I'm going to see him again for another couple of days. He's going to come fly here. He's going to come home, and be with me and my daughter and my dog. And we're just going to be one big happy family. And I want to let you know that sometimes you and your partner are not on the same page when it comes to expectations about how you show up when you're in PMDD. So in my mind, I knew that I've been working on a couple things, like a lot of things actually, as far as what he specifically needed, what my partner needed when I was in PMDD. So I was excited to be able to show up differently to him so that I can see his different reaction and hoping that all of his needs are met. Because as you know, this is a learning process. Like when you have a partner and you're in PMDD, like you have to learn what works best for them. And then you're going months and months and months of showing up in different ways until you reach that sweet spot. And you're like, man, we actually got to those, that month of like, oh, we didn't have an argument because we were actually both meeting each other's needs while in PMDD. And this is what my 2-month private PMDD coaching clients do. We go through different techniques on a week-to-week basis. We meet weekly. And I give them advice on like, hey, try this based off of your individual personalities, your style. This is what your partner needs to see. And I want you to do these specific things. So if you need customized help with your PMDD relationship, make sure you go to the link in my bio and apply to work with me privately so that I can give you customized advice on what would work best for you. So this is what I did. So I figured out this is the process of how I do it. I look at the biggest blow up, the biggest PMDD blow up that we've ever had. And that was actually at this lake house that we went to, not too long ago. And it changes like over the years. Like if you've been with your PMDD partner over the years, you just take the most recent big break, like breakup, blow up, whatever the thing is. And ours was, we went to this lake house and I thought it was going to be super relaxing for the both of us. And I really needed a lot of time for myself. I had a lot of stress going on. I was moving and I just needed time for myself. And so I was going there anticipating having time for myself, but I booked it because it was an environment with activities that he liked. It was on the lake. It was where he could do fishing. But here's the thing. As I've discussed before, I have an avoidant attachment style, meaning I recharge, I'm my best when I have alone time. And my partner has the anxious attachment style where he wants he wants attention. So he doesn't want space. He wants to be closer to me. So when we went on the visit, I was thinking, oh, he's going to go out and he's going to go, fishing on the lake. And then I can go in the house and I can kind of like read a book or like write in my journal or do things by myself. And he was consistently feeling neglected because I wasn't showing up to him the way he envisioned. So this is always the biggest foundational catalyst of all of our arguments, is that in my mind, it's something different than what's in his mind. Meaning when we initially go on the visit or we go see each other, he's thinking it's going to be one way. I'm thinking it's going to be another way. We both end up disappointed because we're never communicating to the other person how we're anticipating this activity to go. And that's what happened. So basically it was a big blow up, a big argument. And he was saying that I wasn't present. I had certain morning routines and certain things where I wasn't acknowledging him. So this particular time I said, you know what? I'm not going to do any of those things that I did because I promised him, because of how horrible it was. I'm like, I will never let it get to that point again. So I made sure I have a very structured morning routine, which I talk about all the time. And I don't really talk or communicate with anyone during the morning routine because no one's normally awake. It's just my daughter's normally sleeping. My dog doesn't talk, so there's that. So when he comes to visit, he tries to talk and like be really social and talkative. And I'm just like constantly looking like, are we talking? Like what's going on? So I said, you know what, this time before I start my morning routine, I'm going to check in with him. So what I did was my morning routine, and again, I know I say this every time, but I'm really going to do it. I'm really going to do it probably next week. I'm going to do an episode on my morning routine because I literally just had a client call right before I was recording this. And they were like, what is your morning routine? And I literally broke it down for them so that they can understand, because it's so beneficial for me and PMDD, especially with how I show up with my partner. But instead of going straight into my morning routine, which I normally do, I said, I'm going to check in with my partner first. So I went in and he was already downstairs because he woke up earlier than me. And I just told him about my day, told him about my plans for the day, because that's one of the things that he needs to know first thing in the morning. You know, he's kind of like, what are we doing for the day? Like, how are you feeling? Like he's wanting to, you know, check in and feel connected, whereas I'm wanting to connect with myself and then connect with him. So I'm like, I'm going to sacrifice that and I'm going to go down there. So I, you know, talk to him and I'm like, all right, this is what's going on. Yada, yada, yada. It didn't take that long. It took like 20 minutes. And then I said, okay, I'm about to go do my morning routine. So I was kind of like, okay, well, now that I've connected with him, I can have free time to go do my morning routine without getting interrupted and him feeling neglected like he did before. So I went and did my morning routine and I finished, you know, that, and I felt good about the day. And then I socialized even more. And we ended up going, it was the next day. And I was like, okay, so today we are going to go to take, our daughter to a church outing. And when we got there to the church outing, I'm like, okay, she got dropped off at the youth church. And she went there for like one of the little, they have like youth, like it's like a little club outing, whatever. And he started saying things like, oh, um, like, do you have any friends? You know, like I told you in the previous episode, he was asking me certain questions about, do I have friends at church? You know, and it really triggered me. And so that was like the first night of me not really understanding how it is that I'm changing my behavior in regards to how I'm showing up to my partner, but they're still giving me the same, you know, symptoms. Like they're still being jealous, they're still being insecure, because these are common attributes. If you have an anxious attachment style, it is very common for you to be jealous and insecure, need more attention, need more validation, need more reassurance. And for the avoidant style, you're needing more space, you're needing more freedom, you're needing more permission to just do your thing. And that's how you feel respected by your partner. That's how you feel validated. And so I was getting frustrated, you know, that like, okay, wait a minute, this doesn't make any sense because I'm showing up differently. I'm changing my morning routine to accommodate my partner, but they're still giving me these same symptoms of an anxious attachment style in a negative way. So I want to preface that even if you're an anxious attachment style or an avoidant attachment style, neither one is wrong. I'm just categorizing it because there's a level of behavior that is associated with it. So you need to understand that there's different things that go with each style. So I was like, okay, well, you know, he's still feeling all of these things, but I'll just keep going. So I went the next day and we went out to dinner. And we went to dinner to this restaurant and it was really, really crowded. And he basically felt, you know, so my partner it's very, let me just preface again, it's very common that just because you have PMDD doesn't mean that your partner doesn't have any other things going on with them. Like I have clients where their partners have OCD, their partners have ADD, their partners have, you know, PTSD. Like you're never the only one that has a condition, but if there are multiple conditions, your partner has a condition, you have a condition or a couple conditions, then when they collide, and you don't know how to manage it, that's normally where the problem comes in. And so that's what happened, where we went to a restaurant. It was a lot going on and my partner has PTSD. You know, he's been in the military for over 20 years and it was a very crowded environment. And he didn't want to sit with his back to the people. Like basically when we went to sit down in the chair, he didn't want to sit so there was a chair and a booth. And when the waiter went over and was like, hey, do you want to sit in the chair? But like, I was like, oh, I'll sit in the booth because I wanted to sit my purse there. And when I went to sit there, you know, he went off on me and was like, oh, you know, like you want to go to war for me? Like I need to be the one that sits right there because I need to be able to protect you. Like all of these things. It was like an PTSD episode and I was in complete shock because I was like, what is going on? Like I was like, I'm like, okay, so, you know, we went to this restaurant where it's like you go up and get your food and then they come around with the meat. It's called fogo de chao. It's like a Brazilian steakhouse, you know, where you go and you get all the meat, but you get your sides on your own. So that's what happened. So after he went off on me about that, I was in complete shock. So then when we went back to the table, I sat in the chair and then he sat in the booth. And then he was like, oh, well, you didn't have to switch seats. And I was thinking to myself, yes, I did, because you freaking went off on me. Like I was like completely offended, but I was also very committed to the growth that had happened within me over the last, couple months, where I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to react like I used to in the past, because in the past, if he would have went off on me, I would have retaliated and went off on him. And then it would have been a big dramatic situation where we're both going off on each other. And then we both do things that we both regret. And it's really hard to repair that damage. It's not impossible, but it makes it harder on us. So what I was able to do was I just shut down. Immediately after he had been angry with me and yelled at me about whatever he was feeling, I just shut down and I was just quiet. So we spent the rest of the dinner and I was just quiet. And he was upset that I was quiet. He was like, well, you don't have to stop talking, because this is the thing. When you have an anxious attachment style and you go off on your rage, whether it's PMDD rage or just rage because you have that anxious attachment style and you're not getting your needs met with the amount of tension, then if your partner shuts down, that's the opposite of what you want, because being that you have an anxious attachment style, you want more attention, you want more validation, you want more reassurance. So if your partner is shutting down, it's a form of punishment for you. And you're kind of feeling like, no, 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 no. Like, I know I behave that way, but I don't want you to shut down. I want you to open up. I want you to be loving. I want you to come closer to me. But a lot of times the anxious attachment style has a way of demanding attention in a way that pushes the avoidant attachment style away, where they don't want to give you what it is that you're asking for because of your behavior of how you're asking for it. So it's not a problem that you want more attention, that you want more validation, you want more reassurance, but it is, if you are demanding it, then the avoidant attachment style is going to go retreat. They're going to shut down. They're going to go do their own thing. They're going to want to get away from that anxious, nervous energy because it's too much for them to process, right? It's like you're just wanting to run away from all of this nervous energy. So that's where I was. And I was committed to not lashing out and not like letting PMDD rage ignite me and take control of me the way that it has so many times before, because I don't like that person. I don't want to be that person that I am when I have PMDD rage. And I was so intentional and like, even though this is the perfect scenario for PMDD rage to come out, I'm not going to allow myself to go there. So even though he was triggering me and saying all these things, this is another thing that your partner may do. If you're not responding to them and they're like going off on you, they may try to say some things that are below the belt, because I know that my partner knows me very well. And he made a comment and was like, oh, I bet you're feeling angry. I bet you want to flip the table right now. Oh, da 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 da. And I knew that he was saying that because he wanted me to have a reaction. And it took everything in me to not respond to him because I didn't want to go there. Like, I really just didn't want to go there. And because I made that decision, I held it in. And I didn't hold it in a way of like, I'm offended and I'm just going to hold it in to like let it go later. I kind of gave him an excuse in the moment. I kind of told myself in the moment, like, you know what? I said, he doesn't mean it in the moment. He's triggered. He's upset. And so I kept going. And then we drove home and I literally held his hand and I'm like, something is really bothering you. Just tell me what's bothering you. And he was just so anxious that he was all over the place. He was worried about the parking. He was worried about this. He was worried about that. And I'm like, babe, I want to be here for you. Just tell me what's going on. Like, I know that something is going on with you and I'm not like judging you, but I just want to be there for you. And a lot of times when your partner who has the anxious attachment style, they may not specifically know how to pinpoint or know what's wrong with them in the moment, but something was definitely going on with my partner and I could feel it, because if you have that anxious energy, your partner can feel it. And I felt it so strong. And instead of running away from it, I was kind of like trying to lean in it because I was trying to see it from a sense of, I have a lot of compassion for you because I know that you're probably suffering with something right now. So I want to know what it is so that I can help you. And so when we drove home, it was completely, he was just trying to make conversation. And I had completely shut down with no intentions of coming back. And so I had mentioned before that my partner snores. And so in the midst of him talking, he was like, you know what? I'll just sleep on the couch. Like I'll sleep on the couch tonight so that you can get some sleep. But it was said in such an angry way that I was just like, okay, well, I mean, that's not solving anything for me, but okay. So I went to bed that night and then I decided the next day, like, let's start the day fresh. Let's start this whole thing over. Like I could have, in the past, what I would have done is been really angry, bitter, resentful about all of the things that happened the night before and kind of used them against him the next day and held on to the comments that were said, the things that were done. And I just wouldn't be able to get over them, wouldn't be able to get past them. But I want to let you know that the things that you can do to stop yourself from having a PMDD argument when you're in that moment where your partner is saying things below the belt is think about the state that they're in. If they're in an angry state, if they're in a triggered state, I've learned the art of not taking it personally because they probably didn't mean it. Because if you think about it, there's a lot of times where we've said things and we've done things when we've been in PMDD and we haven't meant it. So I just assume that when my partner gets in that space and he has his moments, that he doesn't mean it. So I don't take it personally. And then that way, the next day, I'm not offended. And so the next day we got up, we went to, was it Saturday? Yeah. We went out, we did a couple of things, and then we went to church. And then after church, he wanted to spend more time together. And I'm a type of person on Sundays, I kind of like once we get home from church and grocery shopping and all the things, I just want to spend some time for myself. So he had texted me, we had ate dinner together. And then he had texted me like, hey, can we spend some more time together, blah, blah, blah. And I was just like, I really just need some time for myself, right? I was just trying to communicate the boundaries of what I knew that I needed in the moment. I was starting PMDD, and that's when the avoidant attachment style, I get really independent and I just don't want to be around a lot of people because I'm processing a lot of symptoms that are not enjoyable to me. And so I'm not really wanting to be around a lot of people, including my partner. And so I told him that, and he came upstairs and he was kind of like, oh, he was angry, right? So I was calm and I was just kind of like, yeah, I'm just going to be, my normal self. I'm going to be avoidant and just kind of process these PMDD. Like I was very nervous about how this cycle of PMDD was going to go. Like, was it going to be good? Was it going to be bad? When you're in that beginning stage where you don't know what the symptoms are going to look like. And so when he came upstairs and he was angry, I was like, what? I was so confused because I'm like, all I need. And I literally looked at him and I said, babe, I just need some space right now. Like, can I get some space? And what he did was he wasn't supposed to go home until the next day. So it was Labor Day weekend. He was supposed to go home on Monday night. And he was like, you don't want to be with me. You want your space. That's fine. So basically he left. Like he caught an Uber and he left early. And he said a comment before he left. And he was like, I didn't get married for this. And so I've noticed that in every argument, and this happens with a lot of my clients, there's one comment that your partner makes that you hold on to and you're like, I can't get over this. Like that was below the belt. That's the pin that, the needle and the thread, like all of the things, like that's it. Like they said that must mean that this whole relationship is over. And I remember I was so shocked that he actually left it. I took a picture of it. Like I took a picture of him getting in the Uber because I know that it was going to be like this big thing later on. So I said, I really just want to see this moment because I couldn't believe that because I didn't give him the attention that he wanted in the moment, that he was willing to actually leave the house. We were supposed to do things the next day that I had planned. And then it was like 6 o'clock that evening. So there were so many things that could have happened where I could have just had a little bit of time for myself. And then maybe I would have been good for spending more time. But I'm going to explain this later. But this is what happened. So he left. And after he left, I did not hear from him. I didn't text him. He didn't text me for that whole evening. But I was the avoidant attachment style. Let me tell you how this works. When you walk out on us, and I have childhood trauma and abandonment issues, when you walk out on me, I'm thinking you're done. I'm already planning my future without you. Like, I'm thinking this is the end of the relationship. I'm like, that's not a thing that I do. That's not a thing that, even though I'm an avoidant attachment style, walking away means we're over, we're done. So that's why I always tell my private clients, if you're dealing with an avoidant attachment style, don't walk away, because if you try to come back, they may not be there. Because I know that's happened to me plenty of times in past relationships where they've walked away and thought they could, have a temper tantrum and do whatever. And then they try to work it out. And I'm already gone. Like, I'm like, no, I thought we were over. I thought we were done. Because in my mind, I don't associate walking in and out of my life as a normal thing. So I was so hurt, and it hurt me to my core, to where I didn't even have words. And I don't know if you've ever been there, where your partner has said or done something to where you literally don't have words to not only speak to them, but just to speak about what happened, period. Like, I was just in shock. Like, if you've had a situation happen with you and your PMDD partner at night, and then you wake up the next day and you're kind of like, did that really happen? And that's where I was. I was like, did that really happen? Did he really leave? Like, is he really gone? He was, by the way. And he woke up the next morning, and the daily devotional that we send to each other every single day, he sent it to me. And I was like, what brand of crack is he smoking? Like, why does he think that we're completely fine after he walked out on me? So, like, I'm thinking walking out is an abandonment, like, you're leaving me. And I have childhood trauma where I was in foster care and I was adopted and abused after I was adopted, and, given away again, and like all of these things where I think in my mind, if you don't value me enough to stay, then you don't deserve to stay or be with me or have access to me. So we communicate via WhatsApp, and we have these read receipts, and we also have the Apple Watch where we do our morning routines every morning, and we kind of check to see what our steps are, our calories are. Like, that's the way that we connect with each other, because we're long distance. I disconnected him from my Apple Watch so that he couldn't see any of my movement, which is really huge, because that's one of the things that we kind of motivate each other with. And I also took off the read receipts for all of our messages, so that when he sent me a message, he couldn't tell if I read it or not, because he was starting to send me text messages, but I didn't want him to see that I was seeing his messages. Again, this is something very common for the avoidant attachment style, because it's like, sometimes I'll see your messages, but I don't know if I'm ready to respond to them, but I don't want you to see that I see. It makes sense to me, but it doesn't make sense to a lot of people, especially the anxious attachment style, because as soon as he sees a message, he has to respond. Nothing is ever unread. Like, he's very responsive, like, he's kind of like, oh man, I text my friend, they didn't text me back. I'm like, babe, they could be doing something. Like, he's very on top of it, whereas I'm very selective. So after he was back home, and I was here, I really didn't have anything to say. And then I had to go out of town that next week, and my PMDD was horrible with the anxiety. Like, it made the situation that happened made the anxiety and the intrusive thoughts so horrible that I kept thinking worst case scenario. As far as me and him were concerned, like, all of my fears that I never really had were coming to fruition. Like things were just very weird that next week. And so I was like, even though I was at the start of my PMDD, I was like, I really don't want to respond to him until I'm really clear on what it is that I want to do, because I was really in a state. My initial thing was like, file for divorce, in this relationship, leave, run, go, you're done. And then it's like the ego comes in and like the nerve, he had the nerve to walk out on you, and all of this is going on. So I'm just so confused because I still love him. And I'm just, that's the part that kept confusing me. I'm like, I don't like the behavior. I don't love the behavior, but I still love him. But if he feels like this behavior is acceptable, then how do I continue with a person that thinks this is acceptable? Because it triggers my childhood trauma. And this is not something that I want in my life. So it was a very confusing week for me. I went from West Coast in California all the way to East Coast to Virginia, and I had a lot of time to think on the plane. But I also was just I was very much in shock because I felt like I wasn't expecting this situation to happen, because I felt like I did all the right things. Like I didn't shut him out during my morning routine. I did try to be social. I did try to do these things. I did try to go out on dates, even though I was in PMDD. Like it took a lot out of me to put all of that effort forward, and then he react the way he did. So I took the whole week and I didn't talk to him. He kept texting me every single day, sending me the devotionals, and I just didn't respond. I did not respond because I felt like I wasn't ready to, and I wasn't clear on my decision. So it wasn't until I really was on my way back after a whole week of work in another state, not contacting him at all. So imagine not talking to your partner for like a whole 6 days. Like your partner's texting you and you don't respond to them for 6 days. And so I was going back and I was like, okay, let me just be really factual, because so many times we can get in our head and our emotions, and being that I do this for a living, you know, I'm a trauma coach and I, you know, specialize in PMDD. I'm doing my dissertation. I was like, let's get into the science. Let's do science class on what is going on in my PMDD relationship. And what I noticed was, when I finally had the conversation with my partner and I told them, you know, like basically I sent them the picture of them getting in the Uber, and it was attached to a quote that I saw on Instagram. And it was like, if a person can walk away from you, let them walk away. You know, your destiny is not tied to anyone that walks out of your life. And it was very, you know, peaceful for me, because I'm like, yeah, like he's not supposed to be a part of my life because he walked away from me. Yeah, that's what it is. And so I said this to him and he was shocked. He was like, I'm not walking away from you. Like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, what are you talking about? And so when I finally went and had a conversation with him, which lasted like almost 2 hours, he basically told me that I was removing myself from the situation because I was asking you for, you know, love and attention and all the things that you freely gave me a couple of days ago. And now you're making it seem like it's a problem and you're shutting me down, and it was too much for me to handle. Again, he has the anxious attachment style. And so he was like, I was removing myself from from the visit because I didn't want us to have a blow up in an argument about it. So that's why I left the day early, because I could tell there was a lot on your mind and you just really needed space. Well, the problem with this is that he didn't communicate any of that. He just like left in anger and was like, I didn't get married for this. And that was it. And so I took it as that we're done. Like if you tell me I didn't get married for this, that means you don't want to be married. That means we're done. But what he meant was, I got married to be loved and shown attention and affection and to be seen, not to be ignored and neglected. And I didn't see it that way. I saw it as I wanted to take a nap. I wanted to scroll on my phone. I wanted to do like just things by myself that I would normally do without being bothered, just for a little bit. And I guess The problem is I didn't specify a time. So what I always advise my clients is like, if you're an avoidant attachment, you need to give a time. Like, hey, I need an hour to just do my thing, whatever your thing looks like. And then I'll be ready to like, do whatever you want to do. And then that way the anxious attachment style knows when you're coming back versus thinking that you're just not giving them attention forever. And so he was like, that's crazy to me that your perception of the situation was so much different than mine. I really put a lot of thought in it, and I thought I was doing the right thing by leaving and giving you space because you seemed like you didn't want me there. And he started to explain all of these things like you didn't want me there. I wasn't welcome. You wanted to be by yourself, like all of these things. And I'm like, but I never said any of those things. And that's when I realized he was telling himself stories in his mind of what he perceived that I was thinking. And those things were very offensive to him. And a lot of times with the anxious attachment style, if you don't get the attention that you want, you try to rationalize it in your brain about why you're not getting what you want from your partner. And a lot of times that means that you have to make up a story in your head to justify them not giving you what you want. Like, oh, they're not giving me the attention that they want because they want the attention from somebody else. They're not giving me the attention that they want because they don't really love me. They're not giving me the attention that I want because they're not attracted to me. Like, you can insert any of these things. You can fill in the blank with whatever reasons that you want in order for you to understand how they're able to know that you want their attention and then just tell you no. Like, it's so harmful and hurtful for the anxious attachment partners because they're like, all I want is just to be around you and just for you to love me and for you to just go back to being yourself. And if you have the ability to, when you're not in PMDD, to be kind of like a secure attachment style, not an anxious, but a secure attachment style, meaning that you have a healthy balance of independence, but then you also have a healthy balance of leaning into your partner. So if they're used to getting attention from you when you're not in PMDD and it's no problem, then you switch into the avoidant attachment style. They feel neglected and they want to know the reason. And so what happens is when I put the science behind it, when I really put the science behind how did he walk out on me and catch the plane, the train, the Uber, the automobile in order to leave. And that's because he had an angry feeling that coincided with aggressive behavior and it activated his amygdala. So what the amygdala is, it's an almond-shaped part of the brain that's associated with emotions like fear, anxiety, anger, PMDD, rage. This is when the amygdala is activated, that's when all the PMDD rage comes out. And so although my partner doesn't have PMDD, because he felt rejected because I wasn't giving him the attention that he needed, then his amygdala got activated and then he started to act out of character. So if you're wondering why, your partner starts acting out of character because you're fighting or because of certain things, it's because that amygdala is sending a distress signal. It's sending like a signal that it needs help. And so then the hypothalamus is activated, your sympathetic nervous system, by sending symptoms and signals to your adrenal glands. And so what those adrenal glands happen, like when those adrenal glands are activated and your nerves are activated, that's when you get the adrenaline. So if you've ever seen your partner start to get really hyped up, really like a lot of energy after they've been triggered, that means the adrenal glands are pumping those hormones and into your bloodstream, and it's there. So once your partner is triggered, there's no stopping it once it's triggered, because the amygdala is an alarm that goes off when we perceive a threat. So when your partner, you say certain things or you do certain things, like in my case, when my partner asked me for attention and I told him no because I needed space, his amygdala went off like an alarm and it perceived a threat. And it created thoughts of insecurity, thoughts of jealousy, thoughts of fear of abandonment, like I didn't want him, feelings of neglect. All of these things went off. And then it sent signals to the hypothalamus to produce the fight, flight, or freeze response. And which one did my partner choose? The flight. He decided to go. So the fight is, I'm going to go in the argument. I'm going to argue with you. I'm going to go back and forth with you. The flight is, I'm going to leave the situation. I'm just going to go. And the freeze is, I'm just going to shut down. I'm just going to shut down. So this is the fork in the road where you really need to think about how you're going to self-soothe. So when we're getting into the situation with my partner where he just left, that's what signaled all of the drama, all of the horribleness that happened for the duration, for the rest of the time that I was in PMDD. And it all stemmed from the fact that he decided to do the flight method when his amygdala was activated. And so I'm going to talk to you today about how to avoid that happening, how to avoid the PMDD argument before it even starts, how to stop yourself from being triggered before it even starts. And the first thing is I really want you to understand once you've been triggered, it is not easy to go back. So that's why I tell all my clients, don't feel bad that you can't stop yourself in the moment from getting into better behavior. Like if you started going off on your partner, you started saying stuff below the belt, you've started all of this anger and this PMDD rage, and then you're trying to stop yourself. That's not possible. Once you've already been triggered, you just have to ride the wave. You have to ride the wave because it's already started. But the goal is to feel yourself get to that point of being triggered, to have a PMDD argument and to stop it before you get to that place where it's uncontrollable and you just have to wait for it to happen. And so the first thing I want you to do is if you keep the argument in the present. So the reason why my partner was so anxious when he first came to see me, the reason why he was triggered the whole time, because when I talked to him about it after the fact, he said, I knew you were starting PMDD as soon as I was coming there. So I assumed that it was going to look like all of the other times that I've come to visit when you've been in PMDD. So he wasn't basing any of his anxiousness, his anger on the present moment. He was basing it off of things that had happened in the past. And so he was like, yeah, of course I was anxious because remember that time and remember that time. And I'm like, and I literally had to stop him and say, and what did I do during this time? What did I do now that made you feel like this, that made you do this? Like what you have to do is when you have an anxious attached partner, you need to get to the source of their anxiety. Because when they're triggered, their prefrontal cortex, which is the rational, balanced thinking part of the brain, it goes offline. So the prefrontal cortex can't be activated at the same time as the anger response. So it's one or the other, right? So they're panicked, they're anxious, they're looking for something bad at this point. Have you ever had your partner just anything you do, they're picking at you. They're like waiting to see, they're on high alert for anything because their nervous system is activated. They're always scared. They're always thinking that something's, bad's going to happen. And so some of the negative coping mechanisms for that is like drinking, pornography, excessively gaming, gambling, anything that they're doing excessively that's trying to take their mind off of that feeling of being on high alert, looking for something really, really negative. And so what you can do to prevent that from happening before it happens is only talk about what's going on today in the present moment and addressing that. And then the next thing you do is remember that calmness is better than rage. So your arguments are going to be a lot more productive. Your partner's going to be able to hear what you're saying if you're saying it in a calm manner. If you're saying it in a manner where you're yelling, you're screaming, you're doing all these things, your partner's probably going to like chalk it off to like, oh, you're being super emotional, you're being super irrational, and they're not really going to listen to the words that you're saying. But get to a point where you're able to have a calm and rational conversation so that your partner can really hear what you're saying and so that they can respond to you with like, oh, this is what I really felt what was going on, because that's what happened with me and my partner. When he finally, after the argument, and he finally said, well, the only reason I left was because of this reason. And I was feeling this way and I was insecure because of this. Like, I am a type of person where I can handle all of your insecurities, your jealousy, all of the things if I know the root and the core of what they are. But if you're masking them in other behavior and trying to tell me that I'm the one that's wrong, that's when it's a problem. Because now you're judging me and you're not wanting to take responsibility for your own actions. But when he was able to tell me like, well, I knew that you were going to be in PMDD and I just came into this thinking that it was going to be bad, it made a lot of sense. It made a lot of sense because anytime that your partner fears something is going to happen, they will freak out, they will yell, they will leave, they will show erratic, panicked behavior. Because when you feel that anxious, anxiety, all of those feelings, you can't wait for your partner to meet your needs. It's not a situation where you can say, oh, okay, if your partner says, oh, I need space, and you're like, oh, okay, I respect that. But for the avoidant partner, they feel overwhelmed to be on the receiving end of all of that anxious energy, and it makes them feel anxious too. And so when I said I need space, when I was calmly saying to my partner, like, I need space, what he heard was, you don't want to be with me, right? When I was saying, I just need to take a nap, I need some time, like, I can't really pour into you right now. He was like, oh, so you don't want to be with me. Like, it was very final to him. And so with the anxious attachment style, they tend to have this proponent where it's like, my needs are more important than your boundaries. Meaning, I'm so anxious that I need that validation, that reassurance, that even if you have boundaries up where you need space, that doesn't matter. So that was my biggest proponent of being, not okay with the situation, was like, I'm setting a very clear boundary and saying I'm not available to interact right now because I kind of need some space. And the response, instead of being like, oh, okay, I can understand that, babe, like, I'll give you some space, it was like, no, I'm going to make your life a living hell. I'm going to leave and abandon you because I'm not getting what it is that I need. So it's a very selfish mentality, because they get to the point where they get needy and clingy, which is what I've called my partner in the past and what I've heard my PMDD partners call their anxious attachment styles. But it's not needy and clingy in a sense of they're trying to literally take something from you. They're just wanting to spend time with you. They're just wanting to love you. They're just wanting to be in your presence. But when it comes on the preface of being demanding and in a sense of entitlement, and a sense of like, if you don't give this to me, I'm going to make your life a living hell, then it pushes the avoidant attachment style away. So if this anxious attachment style comes from somewhere in their life, they don't just have the anxious attachment style. It's somewhere from their childhood to adulthood where their needs weren't met. And it feels like a sense of survival. Like they need you to meet their needs for connection in the moment. It's not an option. It's not saying, hey, I want you to come spend time with me. It's like, no, I need you. It's the preface for the anxious attachment style. It is the preface that I have needs and I'm scared that my partner won't meet those needs. So I chase after them. And when you start chasing after an avoidant, they run. They flee, they hide, they push back. If they feel like they're backed into a corner because you're trying to demand so many things out of them, then they run and get as far away as possible. So another way of stopping a PMDD argument before it starts is to focus on finding a solution. So if you have the anxious attachment style and you're wanting more attention, then this is where self-soothing is like the best thing for me, right? This is something that I use with all of my PMDD clients who have an anxious attachment style. You need to be able to self-soothe. And what that means is reframing your thoughts into thinking that you're safe and you're loved. So a lot of times what you need to do is you need to ask yourself some questions. If you're feeling really jealous or insecure and about what your partner's doing because you're wanting attention and they're not giving it to you, and you're feeling like, oh, they must not want to be with me because they're not showing me attention. Think about what your partner's actually doing, right? So I was doing homework with my daughter Veronica one night when my partner really wanted some attention. And I'm pretty sure in his anxious mind, he was thinking, oh, I want to spend time with my partner, but she's not giving me any attention. So a way for him to self-soothe was to come upstairs where I have my office and see what is my partner actually doing. When he saw that I was actually doing homework with my daughter, he could be able to cancel out the thought in his mind that I was just choosing not to be around him, choosing not to be with him because I didn't want to be with him. Like, those are some of the questions that you can ask yourself if you have that anxious attachment style. And then if you have the avoidant attachment style and your partner's constantly coming at you and asking you for energy and you're feeling like you're not having time to just do your own thing, think about, what is my partner actually wanting, needing from me, and why? You know, begin to get to that point where you're not like judging your partner for being needy and clingy, but you're just understanding they just need a little bit more than me because they love me, because they want to be around me, and not looking at it as like a negative thing. And so when you are trying to avoid a PMDD argument before it starts, I want you to avoid insulting your partner, telling them what they're not doing. This is one of the biggest things that gets you further and further in the PMDD argument, because you're telling them, you need to do this and you need to do that, and you're not doing this and you're not doing this good enough. Insults are never productive. You're not going to get anything more out of a person by making them feel like the bad person. Insulting someone is not a strategy for finding a solution or getting more attention or reassurance or validation. It's actually going to make them go against you because they're going to think that you are the enemy. If you start telling them everything that you're doing wrong, they're going to be like, oh, well, no need to do anything because you already think I'm doing everything wrong. And the next thing is, if you realize that you're both about to get into a big PMDD argument, have a cooling off period if you feel like you're already triggered. Because like I told you, if you've been triggered, there's no coming back from that. You just have to ride the wave and go through the process. But what I want to tell you is you can go through the process of being triggered by doing the least amount of damage as possible by having a cooling off period. And just say, hey, I'm going to discuss this with you at a later time. But be in a better place to like resolve the issue of what's really bothering them versus trying to talk to them in a time where you're triggered and you're going to say things that you're going to regret later on. And the next thing is, be really clear about the issue at hand. So it's really not unusual for one party in the PMDD argument to not really understand the other. Like in my situation, I was thinking that I was really mad at my partner for leaving, whereas he was thinking he was doing the right thing by leaving because he was de-escalating the situation so we wouldn't get in an argument. So he couldn't believe when I finally talked to him after the 6 days, he was like, wait, that's what you're upset about? The fact that I left? I thought I was doing a favor because it seemed like you didn't even want to be around me in the first place. And I was finally giving you the space that you wanted. And I'm like, why would you think that that's okay? Like, it was such a different mindset, but it was a situation where you have to really think about it. okay, at the end of the day, we both thought we were doing the right thing. I thought I was doing the right thing by communicating my needs, and he thought he was doing the right thing by leaving the situation. Even though he did it in a way that was, not the best, he still thought he was doing the right thing. And the next thing you need to do is be willing to listen, right? In order for me to get clarity on what my partner did, why he did it, I had to listen to him. But I had to do it in a time where I was willing to actually listen, which is why I didn't communicate with him on the first couple of days, because the anger was still there and it was so fresh. I don't have the ability, like if you try to force me to talk earlier than I'm ready to talk, then a lot of stuff is going to come out that's not healthy. So I try to give myself enough time to regulate my emotions so that when I do talk to you, it's just I can be fair and respectful and give my partner the time to talk and not interrupt them and just allow them to feel heard. Because I talked to my partner before and I'm like, all right, when it comes to conflict, what do you need to get over that wall that's built up from being in an argument? And it's very different for the both of us. So what I need is I need space and time by myself so I can process things, weigh the pros and the cons, and then I'll basically come back and be like, okay, I'm ready, to move forward. What my partner needs is he needs to vent. He needs to get everything out. He needs to feel heard. He needs for me to validate the things that he's saying so that he knows that I understand what he's saying. And what I would say, if you have the anxious attachment style, let them go first. Let them go first, because the worst thing that can happen is for you to have a conversation where you're like, you know what, as an avoidant, hey, I processed this on my own. Now I'm coming back and I'm saying, and I'm over it. And then now your partner's ready to process it and they bring up every little thing and it re-triggers you. And then you end up right back in the same place of arguing. So if you let them get everything out and you let them feel like they're being heard and they have that conversation, then your anxious attachment is able to be like, okay, I can get over it now. And then you in turn can take some time after that. So granted, you're not going to be over it on the same day, maybe, because you've given them time to get everything out. And then you have to process that as well as all of your feelings about the situation. And then you may come back, 1 or 2 days and you're like, okay, I'm ready to move forward. And then you both can. But I want to let you know that PMDD arguments is a great way to bring up things that need to be brought up, because we, PMDD partners tend to hold in so much. You tend to feel like you're walking on eggshells. You tend to try to avoid disagreements. So I never say avoid PMDD arguments. What I say is learn how to do them productively and not in a sense of being triggered and then lashing out in PMDD rage or just rage, period. And it takes practice. It takes practice of really understanding, what does my body feel like right now? What are the signs that I'm being triggered? Because when you know those signs, then you can take the time to kind of stop yourself. I knew that, when my partner was saying all those things, I was being triggered and I was practicing not immediately responding to my trigger. And that's what helped me in this particular disagreement to not say things below the belt that I didn't mean. And that's progress. And so if you have that anxious attachment style, you're wanting so many things from your partner and you're wanting all this, think about what you can do to self-soothe and know that when you initially get triggered, let your partner know. Because the worst thing you can do is get fully in that triggered mode and catch them off guard, and then they don't know what is going on. So these are some of the ways to stop PMDD arguments before they start, so you can stop doing damage to your PMDD relationship and have the supportive and loving relationship that you both desire and deserve. You got this. I hope this PMDD episode helped you and your partner in your struggles within your relationship. And if this is something that you know that you need help with and you need further support, individualized support, make sure you're going to inlovewithpmdd.com and you're getting those private sessions to really work through what you're going through in your relationship, specifically in regards to PMDD. And also, I want you to leave a 5-star written review on Apple Podcasts. What this does is it helps other PMDD sufferers and partners find this show that can help them get these free PMDD relationship tools. I remember what it felt like to not know that there were tools out there specifically for PMDD relationships. So I want to make sure that you are sharing these tools with others, share them on your social media, share them with people that you know that are also struggling in their PMDD relationships. Until next episode, this is Dr. Rose, your PMDD relationship psychotraumatologist. One more thing, I almost forgot. I now have the Fresh Start PMDD Partners Workbook. What this workbook can do is if you've had past traumatic experiences with your partner, past fights, past arguments, and they keep coming up every single month in PMDD, I created a Fresh Start Workbook so that you can deal with all of the traumatic experiences that have happened in the past in PMDD rage and all of these things so you can stop going through the same cycle again and again and again. So get that workbook. It comes with a video episode of the actual podcast that I recorded on getting a fresh start in your PMDD relationship. So you're not continuing the same cycle again and again and again. So make sure that you get that workbook. And if you need those individualized counseling sessions, you know where to go, inlovewithpmdd.com. Until next time, we got this. Love you.